6 years. It took me 6 years since I started my first business at 15. I'm 20 now, turning 21 in a few months, to realize how twisted my mindset was on business, success, and hustle culture. It's like for the longest time, the online business space conditioned a generation of founders to believe that grinding late nights, not spending time with family, was the only pathway to success. But quite frankly, as part of the journey, I just suddenly woke up and I started following the doctrine of actually defining my own success metrics and working no more than 3 to 4 hours a day. And ironically, I actually make more money doing so. So for a little bit more context, I'm Jay. I started my first biz in e-com and Instagram theme pages when I was in high school, and it completely broke my limiters on the potential of the online world. And now I started off with probably one of the most Chinese mindsets ever. And even then, breaking that limiter of pinching my pennies was a really big move already. But now through my personal brand and time creative directing, I've built a profitable personal brand that lands me inbound for my studio and business partnerships that I'm involved in. But yeah, this is a really candid, unscripted video. So let me break down the timeline of exactly how I broke that initial limiter of hustle culture. I think early on in my journey, I was absolutely addicted to YouTube. My first YouTube video was actually posted when I was 8 years old. I did like a magic trick or something like that. And ever since then, I've just been a consumer of the space when it came to hard work, motivational hope core, and just grind set culture in general. I would be watching the Hormozis of the world. But over time, I realized the big problem with that was a lot of their doctrine was creating big sacrifices for yourself to achieve a success that you can cash out on later. And credit to where credit's due, that's actually what gave me the exact foundations of running my business to what it is up to today. I don't think I would have gotten there without it. But I knew in the long term, this wasn't sustainable. I knew at some point my eye bags would give out. I knew at some point that for me to scale up, I would need to win back more of my time rather than working every single hour of the day. It got to the point where my family, every time I went to a gathering, or even my friends, the first thing that they would ask me when they would see me was, "Have you been busy at work?" And my answer would always be, "Yeah, I'm always working." And genuinely, it was sad. I would get home and then go straight back to the desk and just work directly in the business. Now, I'm pretty adamant on running a lean team, so I always wanted to do those things for myself, and that might just be a selfish struggle of mine. But what that made me realize was that the more and more hard work that I put in didn't necessarily mean that I would get the exponential returns that I would actually need to achieve the metrics that I wanted. It's like I'd constantly be stuck essentially freelancing for just barely above 10K a month. And I just wasn't building any leverage around what I was doing. And every single day I would wake up, even though I was technically making my own choices and doing what I wanted to do, I felt like I was just suffocating the entire time. But okay, the first step that took me from that point to where I am now is being a lot more intentional with what my goal and ending actually is. And very candidly, I actually write down everything now that I'm thinking. So every single morning, I'll make note of just things that I'm thinking about, what my goals actually are, and honestly, just break down what my priorities are. If you're able to design a life under your own terms and define your own success, you can start to work backwards and realize that it was never about the flashy cars, the nice house. And all it really is, it's just time freedom. The freedom to do what you want, when you want, without ever having to look at a price tag, without having to think about if you have to show up for a meeting, and have the ability to give to who you care about. And that's like a finite figure that you can actually work backwards from. The second you're able to design that kind of life for yourself, then it just becomes so much more accessible to reach a point where you can actually achieve this sort of floating state, which we'll get to in a second. And I want to get to this because I want to show you this book in a second, but this is really the unlocker for me. I was getting into sport sort of mid last year, and I started reading this book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Now, it is a tennis book, but it also talks a lot about flow state, and not just flow state, but made me realize that my best performances weren't actually from the points where I was putting in a lot of effort. It was usually when I just trusted myself to get the work done. See, if you can focus on a singular point and feel the most relaxed while doing so, that's when you can start to make the most progress. Not because you hustled your way there, but because you were wired to instead understand that effort is not proportional to output. You find your best performance in relaxation. That is why you are better at some things than others. And then when you compound that with the doctrine of Naval Ravikant. Now, this is a new one that I just picked up, so I'm not going to go into too much depth on this, but once I started reading the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and I'm still reading it now. Where am I at? You start to realize that the journey of building wealth and happiness happen one and the same. They're not conditional of each other. They are complementary to each other. They're in parallel. Everything you do relates to sustainability. And the second you can start to write your own code towards your life along the grain rather than against the grain, that is when you can start to spark the furthest progress in any venture that you take. That includes business, that includes personal branding, that includes sports, relationships, literally anything that you do. Now, I'll probably make another video on this after I've fully gone through and processed everything. And it's super funny because now that I'm working alongside my own competitive advantages, it just makes the entire process so much easier to grow, to enjoy the game. And I honestly see myself doing this for a very long time. And it also rubs off on the work that you do and the results you give for others. So it helps immensely. I really need you to understand that that this entire journey of self-discovery and just living what I do, you will reach a point where you have to sort of unlearn these types of things. The later you realize this, the more people end up empty-handed, not financially, but spiritually and mentally. And that is a gut-wrenching punch, because what is the point of doing it in the first place? You're working out of desperation rather than trying to build out of mission and purpose. And that doesn't take you nearly as far. There were so many cases when I first started out where I would just be switching between different models because I didn't really care. I just wanted the outcome. And because of that, I wasn't necessarily designing the business for me. I was optimizing for someone else's competitive advantage. And that slowly drains you because you're no longer finding the parallel, working along the grain rather than against it. Maybe I'll do this video again properly as a full guide if I have more SD card storage. But the red thread behind all of this is not enough people love the game. And loving the game is everything. There's this chef, Marco Pierre White, that said something along the lines of, if you're a chef and you cook with your hands, then you're a laborer. If you cook with your hands and your heart. Wait, let me find this again. Okay, so a person who works with their hands is a laborer. A person who works with their hands and their brain is a craftsman. And a person who works with their hands, their brain, and their heart is an artist. Like, understand this early rather than later, but reaching your end goal will never give you the happiness that you want, because there's going to be that next goalpost. The whole idea of people saying it's the journey, not the destination, is just an oversimplified version of really we need to just spend more time introspecting and waking up to. This is probably one of the most spiritual videos that I'll ever put out, but genuinely, I've paid tens of thousands of dollars for an hour of some people's time before to move the needle in my business, and waking up to this, I would say, is arguably just as, if not way more valuable. If you're at this point in the video, don't take this entire thing lightly. You should work along your tailwinds, and that's exactly what my brands are built out of, and how we build our clients' personal brands and their content strategy, their positioning, everything. And yeah, over time, you start to live such a more fulfilling, successful, and low cortisol life, I guess you can call it. All right, let's wrap it there. There's like 30 seconds left on this card.